I'm Jim Collison, live from the Gallup campus here in Omaha, Nebraska. This is Gallup's Call to Coach, recorded on March 18th, 2016. Call to Coach is a resource for those who want to help others discover and use their strengths. We have Gallup experts and independent strengths coaches share tactics, insights, and strategies to help coaches maximize the talent of individuals, teams, and organizations around the world. If you have questions during the live webcast, we do have a chat room that's available for you right below the main video. Just look down right there. There's a chat room, easy to get into. Just in the bottom left-hand corner, it says Login. Select that. Choose a guest account. Put your name where it says guest so we know who you are and click Login. No account necessary to do that. Easiest way, and today we're going to look for your questions, so make sure you're getting your questions in the chat room. It's a great way to interact with us. If you're listening to the recorded version or you have questions about custom strengths coaching solutions for small, medium, or large organizations, super easy. Just send us an email, coaching@gallup.com, and there is a contact form right there on the live page if you want to use that as well. Don't forget to visit the Gallup Strengths Center, just gallupstrengthscenter.com, for your StrengthsFinder coaching resources and training needs. You can also catch the video on both streaming and now downloadable audio for offline listening. You can recapture that time in a car, on a train, and a plane to listen to these. And actually, lately, I've been listening to my podcast at 1.2 speed. You can get through a lot of material very, very quickly. Some of us can even listen to that at 1.5, and it allows us to get through the podcasting material very quickly. Many of those podcatchers have that availability. Check out everything. It's on our coaches blog, coaching.gallup.com. Dean Jones is our host today. Dean is the principal architect of Gallup's Global Client Learning Strategy, which means Dean does all things smart and learning here at Gallup. And Dean, welcome to Call to Coach.
Yeah, thanks for having me here, Jim. I appreciate it.
Always good to have you, Dean.
Yeah, it's great to be here. This is one of the favorite things that I do, and it's just great. I love watching the chat because I love, for many of you, I know you and I've met you in person. Some of you I actually just know through doing these kind of webcasts. So that's terrific. So yeah, so really, really happy and excited to be here today. As I do each one of these, I feel like I'm learning too what's meaningful, what's useful, how to be able to communicate this in ways that are better for you. I am a very fast talker, so a lot of the feedback I got last time I was on was, "Hey, slow it down, buddy." I'm activator number one. So I'm sure that if you listen to this podcast at 1.5 speed, it sounds like just gibberish, like alien language or something, right? So my top five, just people have asked, my top five, I'm activator number one, focus number two, my number three is woo. My number four is strategic, and my number five is relator. I always tell people my number six, which is communication, because that's also pretty evident with me. The topic for today, so I was thinking about what would be most meaningful and would be stuff that you might not have been exposed to relative to in our courses and other stuff. I want to be able to bring you stuff that's a little bit new. And one of the things I thought I'd do is start in the sessions that we're doing here, start talking about what we describe as kind of the pathway to strengths mastery. So really, what is that pathway, or what are those key stages along strengths mastery? And I think, as coaches, when you think about our role as coaches and really our mission, our calling as coaches, it's to really help people become masterful. So as part of that, as coaches, you really get into, you got to get your head into what is that pathway to mastery. And it's not like, we certainly know, because everybody's unique, that pathway is always going to be a different pathway for each person. But there are some milestones along the way that we would say, gosh, these are some of the key milestones or some of the key signposts along the way where you say, gosh, we can tell that somebody's at a particular level in their development because they've hit that particular milestone. So those are the things I want to start to talk about today, right? That process of mastery, I want to take a step back before we kind of dig into that piece. That process of mastery is really what learning folks call integration. That's that part where it feels like, there's that learning that's out there, and we start to assimilate the knowledge or the skills or the experiences in ways that it gets assimilated into the way that we behave, so that it actually shifts our behavior or becomes integrated, if you will, into our behavior. So, when you talk to learning people often talk about integration or that process of integration, and that's really what we are really focused on. right? And hastening or accelerating or supporting that process of integration. The thing that that's unique about the work I think we do around strengths is, and where we as Gallup talk about it a lot, is we define it as transformational. So it's really something where it shifts the context in which people see themselves, others, and their environment. And as we dig into this today, what you're going to see is some of those elements where there's really opportunities for transformation. I think as strengths coaches, and this is a big point, what will make your coaching magical? And by extension, valuable. And I really mean that, like, it has this kind of magical quality. I know for many of us who coach people, or teach people, right, you want to have that kind of quality in the way you deliver what you deliver, that it feels magical to people, that it feels just remarkable to people. Not informational. Not just like, hey, I'm going to give you some knowledge, I'm going to do some knowledge transfer. Not just about skill building, although I will tell you that good coaching, there's a knowledge component and there's a skill building component. But what makes coaching really magical is that it's got that transformational element. That people literally have insights and epiphanies that change the way they see the world. And that's that point where people go, gosh, I had those big aha moments, and it's like all the lights came on in the room. I was fumbling around in the dark, and boom, the lights are on, and all of a sudden I know where I'm going. And that's, I think, what as coaches we want to strive for, is we want to strive for that kind of magical element. So I think as you start to understand, yes, and Andrea, I love the thing you said on the chat here, it really is emotional. So there's an element where there's new understanding. There's an element of it where there's a new perspective. It's like you've just had a paradigm shift. But there's also a real emotional component to it that I think is so valuable, and is that kind of piece where it feels like, gosh, it's not uncommon that people get really moved when that happens, because in some cases they've been frustrated or struggling with stuff, and when the lights come on like that, that's just huge, right?
Dean, can I ask a question? So
yeah,
a lot
please.
of our coaches come at this from a learning standpoint. In other words, facts and figures, and how do we? What are some tips and techniques to be able to switch that over to that transformational piece?
Yeah, I think that's right. I don't want to discount knowledge, right? Because in many cases we're at Gallup, we're in the knowledge business, right? We're uncovering, unconcealing things that and helping people really understand things at a deeper level, right? I think and I don't want to discount the skills piece. I'm going to go into this today and kind of talk about some specifics around each one of these. That piece, that transformational piece, is really looking from how do you help somebody shift their perspective so they see something differently. And I'm going to give you some specifics today as we go through this so we can do it. But I think that's a really important piece. Maureen's got an echo, Jim, and that I wonder if it's because of me. Is it me?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's okay. Just keep talking, and I'll stay out.
You'll figure it off.
Yeah,
You'll figure it out. Okay, great. Okay, I'll let you do that. Okay. So, okay, great. So here's what I want to be able to do, and this pathway to strengths mastery is really it's based on a model that we built before we started building the strengths coaching curriculum. So when we were about to start to build this strengths coaching curriculum, we got this group of really masterful coaches together, Jackie Merritt and Kurt Liesfeld and a bunch of others, right? Along with Scott Caldwell, who was the key kind of curriculum designer for this, and we got all of us kind of got in a room, and the first thing we started was really looking at what are those milestones on the pathway to mastery. Right? So from that moment that somebody was exposed to strengths to that moment where we could say, gosh, they are really masterful in strength, their talent, and their depth of understanding their own talent, and really their depth of facility in pointing their talents, in having developed their talents to strengths that they could use meaningfully in life. That's really what we were talking about relative to mastery, right? So we were really looking into that. What does that continuum look like? What is that? What are the key kind of signposts on that? I'm not going to go through the whole model today, but the piece I wanted to start with were three of the beginning stages around that, three of the kind of core stages. And I always this sounds funny, but every time I start talking about this, I can see everybody rolling their eyes. There's a point like, oh God, really? Do we have to just start with the first three basic ones? It's like everybody's just like, please, I know this, right? But here's the part that's always tough for me, right? Is I when I talk to people who are being coached, oftentimes somebody's like skipped over these first three, and in fact the work that needs to get done isn't done, and that's why they're struggling in many cases. So I always think that the first three stages I'm going to talk about today is understanding, awareness, and appreciation. So understanding, awareness, and appreciation. In a minute, I'm going to start to kind of unpack each one of those three. The piece, I always think about these three almost like the base of a pyramid. You know, I don't know anything about history, but I tell a lot of stories that have historical context, right? So, my understanding is when the Egyptians built the pyramids, there was just huge precision in the way they cut each block and they placed each block. And one of the things that made the whole pyramid, the way that it is, right, that made everything work was that base foundation. That foundation that was built was so precise. It was perfectly measured. And the thing that I think historians talk about is how, given the sort of limited tools that Egyptians had to work with at that time, given how were they able to generate that level of precision? And I think that it's the same way with your coaching. This is the foundation. And the pyramid that you're building, the mastery that you're building in somebody, it can only be as big and precise. It can only be as big and set up correctly as this foundation. So getting this foundation right is so important. What I find, and I'll talk about this again, but what I find is when you've got somebody who's struggling, and particularly struggling around the utilization of their talents, you got to go back to these three. Right? So they may have been working with their strengths for a long period of time, but what you've got is, they're struggling. You got to go back and say, hey, let's cover these three, because sometimes in some places people have misconceptions or they're stuck somewhere, right, around this that they just didn't know. So it really is a function of mastery that you get these three right. Okay, so first I want to start with an understanding. I want to just start to unpack each one of these a little bit and talk about them. And Jim, to your point earlier about how do you, as a coach, how do you make sure you turn the lights on in these conversations, that it's not just, hey, something I know, right? So the first one is understanding. That is really, do people really understand what their talent themes are? It's this funny thing about it. It seems so basic, but there's so much mischief that starts right there. It's a funny thing I notice is sometimes people think they understand their strengths profile, but they don't really understand it, and they've made up a whole bunch of stuff about it. Like they didn't read the report, they just sort of made up stuff, and it's so funny. I'm telling you probably too many stories about myself, but I read every night before I go to sleep, and sometimes I've fallen asleep and it's like I think I'm still reading in my dreams, but I'm just telling myself a story, and it has nothing to do with what's in the book, right? I'm just telling myself a story in my head, and I go back to the book and go, okay, that's not how the story went. It's kind of the same way. It's like people have kind of fallen asleep around their strengths, and they're telling themselves a story about their strengths, but that's actually not what that talent theme is. So there's this funny story. I was leading a big strength session at UCLA for a group. It was through the business school there. It was a group of MBAs. And there's this great woman, really accomplished. She was in the executive MBA program there. Really accomplished woman. She was a lawyer, and she had gone back to get her MBA. So this is like, she had so much horsepower, right? This great person. And we were at the point where we were talking about our top 5 themes, and so she had significance in her top 5. She raises her hand and she says to me, look, this significance theme, I think this is wrong. I don't think that's me at all. I think the report's wrong. I'm like, really? I'm like, are you sure about that? She's like, yeah, absolutely. She said, it's not really me. I'm like, okay, great. I said, why don't you do this? I said, why don't you read that description of the theme? Just read it out loud for us right now. So she starts reading the description, right? And she's reading it out loud so she can kind of hear herself. She's reading the description out loud, and she starts smiling. And she gets through the description, and then she starts laughing. And I said, what are you laughing about? And she says, this is me. And I'm like, yeah, no surprises here, right? It is really like, that when people really get grounded in what the theme is, they can really see themselves. Sometimes you have people that, like, they read the theme and it's kind of like, well, what significance means to me or what activator means to me is this. And I'm like, no. It's not like a Rorschach block. You know, like one of those ink blots, you know, the Rorschach test. It's not like what this means to me is this, and like it means something. No, you know, it's like, look, there are a set of traits that are part of that theme. So part of it is kind of getting in the world of what those traits are. That's one of the reasons, by the way, that we tell coaches to start with the signature themes report before you do the Strengths Insight report, so that people can see the theme in its sort of generic state. So they really get grounded in what is the theme in its generic state before you then go to the Strengths Insight report, which is the personalized report, right? You really want to get people grounded in what is the world of that theme first. And then they can see, okay, what's the variation of that theme that's given by the dynamics of my themes together. The other thing that I notice, and I tell you, I notice it with people who've been coached. I notice it with coaches, and this is one of the, you know, if people accuse me of beating a drum, this is one of the drums that I beat. Right? Is that many people don't have a lot of depth in the themes. So they know the theme by one trait in the theme or a couple traits in the theme, but they don't know all the facets of the theme. And when you're developing your talents into strengths, you know, obviously you want to know, maybe not so obviously, but you want to know all those facets because you're going to pick up all those facets as you develop. So that gives you a much bigger canvas. Instead of working with primary colors, you're working with a whole palette of different shades. And you want that palette, you need that palette in order to be able to develop. So to give you an example, it's like significance. Significance, you know, people tend to define significance as the desire to be important, right? It's like, oh, you got significance, oh, you want to be important, boom, done, you know, check, got that one done, let's move on to the next one, right? But there's all these facets to significance. There's that desire to stand out, to be on center stage. So, you know, people who are high significance, putting them in the background does not work, right? They need to be center stage. There's the being recognized piece of it, so that they're being recognized as unique and special. So it's really important for people that are high significance that their uniqueness really shines out. It's not just like, hey, they're recognized as part of a group or part of it. They've got to, you know, they've got to be special. And sometimes you see that dimension with people who are high significance where it's kind of like, hey, the normal rules don't apply to me, right? Because I'm unique, like that. You see that kind of comes with that territory, right? Being seen as credible, professional, successful, whatever that thing is for them, that's also a really big thing for them. So it's not just, hey, am I important, but also am I seen as credible? Am I seen as professional, like that? And then being another dimension of it is being connected with others who are credible, professional, successful, whatever that thing is for them. So particularly people who, for people that are high in significance, being tied to people that are in positions of power or authority or are influential in a community, being tied to those people is very important, right? Another dimension, and man, I tell you, this is one that I think gets overlooked a lot, of significance is having enormous freedom and independence. So there's like, people who are high significance need a ton of freedom to be able to design their own work and do their own thing. They also need to be able, they've got this internal drive to be important. So part of it's really grounded in this kind of deep yearning, right? So there's all those aspects, right? If you just had the desire to be important, if that's all you had about significance, and you were trying to develop that, you got a limited runway. You got to look at, okay, all those different facets and really unpack all those different facets. What I find is what happens when you haven't unpacked all those facets is, one is people that you're coaching or you as a coach yourself get it confused with other themes. So I tell you with significance, I see it confused with activator, I see it confused with self-assurance, I see it confused with command, I see it confused with maximizer. Like, you see it gets confused, you don't actually, you know, all those facets, because you don't have a command of all those facets, they get confused with other things. I also think you're more likely, and you see this with people where they haven't fully unpacked those themes, they get stuck with a label. Right? So this is why this understanding of all the facets is really important, right? Is that is if there's just, you know, it's like, hey, you're high competition, you want to win, boom, right? People get stuck with that like a label or like that's a thing, rather than that they're in the world of something, right? So and this goes back, Jim, to your thing about transformation. When people get the thing fully unpacked, they're more likely to have those aha moment, right? That moment where they experience being known, and known in the fullness of who they are, right? They start to have that experience of being known, which opens the door to that experience of being able to contribute. So one is taking the time really to unpack people's themes. Now, can you do this with all 34 themes? Yes, over time, but this is why we tell people, hey, start with your top 5, with your signature themes. Because if you're really going to unpack all those themes with somebody, it's going to take time to do that, and you want to lead with the ones that are the most dominant themes, so that right? Yeah, exactly. Is there a reason? So, Maureen, I want to take your question. I agree with the idea of reviewing signature themes before IG. I don't know what IG is. And so, however, coaching people, particularly in high places, when they've read multiple reports, it gets clumsy. Is there a reason Gallup doesn't put all the reports into one, signature themes and insight? I think you want the insight one and the theme sequence. I don't know if there's a reason why. Oh, the insight guide. Got it. We call it. I call that the Strengths Insight Report.
Right.
So I don't think there's a reason per se. In fact, it might be a good idea. A lot of times, the reason they were separate in the beginning was because we use them for different purposes. It's exactly this thing. In the beginning, honestly, we would just work with somebody around that signature themes report and then add the other reports over time. We didn't just give it to everybody up front. When we moved to this online delivery thing, that's where we started to give everybody access to all 3 reports. But that doesn't mean that you as a coach have to use all 3 right out of the gate. I think it's, they will have read all those 3 reports, but gosh, I think it's so important. You could spend the first 6 months of mastering your strengths just working on your top 5. Just working on your top 5. And we're not trying to limit people. And in fact, sometimes it had that thing like, why aren't they giving this to me? Are they trying to limit this? Yeah, and in fact, having access to those reports takes away that thing where it's like, no, we don't want to limit you, and we do want to focus you. So, focusing on really mastering those top 5 and getting the understanding deep of all the facets in those top 5 really makes a difference. So that's the understanding one. So that's the first piece there, okay? The second thing, and JB, the thing about squishing it all together, I love that. You want to be like for people, and particularly when they've got a lot of themes, like people have like maximizer and command and significance all together. I see like self-assurance and significance in the top 5, right? It's like peas and carrots. They all get mixed up together, and they can't. You want to help people be able to pull them apart. Right? When you pull them apart, it's like, understanding all the facets really helps people. I don't know if you guys have had that experience. Maureen, you were talking about leading a big group, right? Sometimes I'll be leading a group of people, and they'll stand up and they'll start talking about their achiever theme, and I realize they're actually not. They're talking about responsibility, and it's because they sort of know achiever as works hard, right, or wants to cross things off the list, right? But they don't know all the facets, so they're actually talking about a different theme. So the more you help people focus, I think the more it helps, right?
Dean, so I find another
another
problem. Let me see if I can do this without echoing. Is damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. If you give them too much information, they want less, and if you give them a little bit, they want more. And so it's one of those problems.
Right, and to your point, we don't want people to feel like, gosh, we're limiting them, right? Because we don't want people constrained. We want people to run. And part of being a coach, it's just like being a coach. It's just like being an athletic coach. Sometimes what you're doing is just you're helping people condition. So you're helping people be able to focus, and it's like, hey, look, you're not going to be able to do that the first time out of the gate. You got to practice this piece to get that piece later. And so, like that, right? Let me go to the second one. The second one's awareness. And awareness is a tricky one because it gets confused with understanding pretty easily. I find like if you ask somebody, are you aware of your talents, right? Or are you aware of your activator theme? They'll say yes, but what they're really saying is, I understand it, not necessarily that I'm aware of it. So sometimes understanding and awareness get collapsed there, right? where they're thinking about, if you're asking them, hey, are you aware of this, or do you see this on the court, what they're speaking from is that they do understand it or they've got it in that way. They're not thinking about their awareness. So awareness is really self-awareness. And I really find with the awareness piece, it's that ability to catch yourself red-handed. It's that ability to be able to catch yourself in the act of using that theme and go, oh man, there it is. There is my responsibility again. Right? Oh, there it is. There's my self-assurance. It's that you can, how you know somebody's got really awareness is as it's happening, they can see those strengths, firing. They've got those things right there. So they've got clear awareness of what they're using when. It's kind of like, I'm the king of analogies today, apparently, but it's kind of like a dancer who knows, a dancer who knows when he's doing the cha-cha and when he's doing a box step and when he's waltzing, right? You know what steps you're doing as you're doing them. And so, with awareness, it's really like that. It's, hey, I'm going to use you become intentional. And you can see, this is sort of a lifetime exercise, right? Is at the beginning you start to know about that, and then as you continue to master it, you get better and better, so you can say, yeah, I'm deploying my responsibility in this way, in a way and you've got a real facility with your talents and your strengths that you can intentionally be able to deploy those. So when working with people around awareness, I will tell you, I think that the trick is really helping people to understand that, to have that awareness of when they're using which strength when. A lot of times when we're asking people, we're sort of testing people's awareness, we'll say, can you think of a time you used your achiever? Or can you think of a time you used your activator? And they go out and they say, oh yeah, I used my activator then, right? That's not really a test of awareness. That's a test of understanding. So let me say this again, because I want to make sure you get this. This is kind of a fine distinction. When you start with the talent and you ask people to find an example, so you move from the talent to the example, what you end up doing in most cases is testing people's understanding of the strength, okay, or of that talent theme. Can you think of a time you used your activator, right? Oh, I can think of a time last week I used my activator. What we're testing for with that is, does that person know what activator is, and can they think of an example from their own life when activator was firing, okay? So when you move from the talent to that example, what you're doing is testing understanding. It's not really about testing awareness. What I like to do with that is unpack everything that they did like the previous day, right? Let's think of an important moment yesterday. So it's time bound, right? So it's time bound. Let's think of what was your most important moment yesterday? What was the biggest thing you accomplished yesterday? What was your most difficult moment yesterday? Let's start from that moment and unpack that moment so we can see how your talents were at play then. When you move from the specific example back into the talent, that's when you're working on awareness. So you make it time bound, right? You make it time bound, and particularly in those moments where in those moments that are significant moments for us, right? Gosh, I had an argument with my spouse yesterday, right? Or, God, I had a big presentation at work yesterday, and it was the culmination of some work I've been doing for a while. You take that moment and start to unpack it. When people can really see that everything that they're doing, everything they think, they feel, they do, is given by their strengths, is given by those talent themes. We used to say, roughly speaking, about 60 or so percent, 60, 70% of what you think, feel, and do is given by your top 5, and about 90-some percent is given by your top 10 or 12. That when you could basically unpack your whole day yesterday and say, in all the choices I made, in all the things I decided to pay attention to, all the things I decided to ignore, those were all given by my strengths. That starts to give you awareness of how your strengths are firing, right? So again, moving from the talent to an example, that tests understanding. And it's a good test of understanding. Hey, can you think of a time you used your achiever? Great. Let's test understanding there. Now, let's move from the example. Let's take yesterday. Let's move from the example and back into the talent. That helps us to be able to develop awareness. So we're really clear about, we're really aware of how those talents are working. One of the things that, we say this in the accelerator course, but I don't know that it always fully lands for people, is talents are a filter. And that we see the world through that lens of our talents. And we mean it literally like a filter. There are things that get filtered out because of our talents that we just don't see because of our talents, that we get limited by. There's things that get through because our talents, the lens of our talents, let them through. So, everything the way we see the way the world is given to us, and the way we correspondingly behave is given by that talent filter that we see the world through. What happens is, and this is why awareness is so important, is when you start to become really aware, and not just, hey, can I pick a time when I used my achiever, but when you're really aware of how everything you're doing is given by your talents and strengths, you start to be able to see beyond the filter. So it's like you can see through the filter to the other side, and you start to be able to see the world in a more holistic way, and that is transformational. So it's not like I'm high in competition, I see the world as winning and losing, I see the world as a game to be played, and how come Jim won't get with the program, right? It's like, how come no, it's like, no, that's the way I see the world. And I can own that for myself. Oh, I'm high competition, I see the world that way. There are other ways of seeing the world. And in fact, I start to be able to appreciate those in a whole new way as my awareness grows. It's one of the reasons in the accelerator course that we put the Johari window in there, right? I love that model. It's such an old model, but it's like an oldie but a goodie, right? It's like that model, which is just one of the fundamental models of building self-awareness. As more things work into that, move into that open area, I've got more facility and, in fact, more appreciation. So in this awareness area, your job as a coach is really to help people to be able to become aware of everything that everything that they think, they do, they feel is given by their talents, and to be able to have that intention. They can say, just like a dancer, they can say, like I'm doing a cha-cha now, or I'm doing a waltz. That they're intentional in the way that they're using their strengths in that way. So that was awareness. Okay. Last one here I want to go to, and that's appreciation. So you can't develop talents into strengths if you don't appreciate them. It sounds funny, but and we all have worked with people who are like this, that they like their strengths, but they love other people's strengths. They like their strengths, but they really wish they were this whole other group of strengths. So it's, and you can't really go to work on developing your talent themes into strengths if you don't love them. I mean, it's just that cut and dried. You gotta fall in love with those, and it's really that piece of, with self-awareness then comes, hopefully, the next step is self-love, right? And it's why we do that exercise, Love, Crazy, Envy. Everybody loves that exercise, and I think people love that exercise just because the name is so funny. Everybody loves that, but there's a real intentionality around it. It starts with, what is a theme that you really love about yourself? What is the one that you really love? In order to be able to do that, you've got to be able to figure out what it is that they love and appreciate about their talent. The way that there's two things that I find that are useful around helping people really appreciate their talent. One is to help them figure out what's really unique or special about them and their talent. Is what is unique about your achiever? What's unique about your command? Sometimes that's in combination with their other talent themes. Sometimes that's just in isolation. The way their focus manifests itself is just this cool, kind of beautiful way. The way that they use their responsibility is such a cool, unique expression. But really helping them figure out what's unique or special about your own talent. For goodness sake, we say over and over again, your top 5, the configuration of your top 5 is 1 in 33 million. Right? That's pretty unique. That's pretty unique. That is as unique as a fingerprint. So helping people to see what's unique, that's one piece that really helps, I think, with appreciation. The other thing is helping people figure out the value or the contribution that their talent provides. So uniqueness and then the value and contribution. What is it that you can contribute? What is it uniquely, the value that you come in? When you show up, you don't know what it's like when you're not in the room, right? You've never considered, you don't know really what it's like when you're not there. Because when you're there, right? So you only know what it's like when you're there. When you're not in the room, you don't know what that's necessarily like. So helping people to understand, gosh, when you show up, this is what shows up. This is the value that shows up. This is the contribution that shows up. We all get into action. We all start to embrace new ideas. We all feel included. We all are excited because we know that there's a great urgency around what we're going to do. So with appreciation, if you help people figure out what's unique and then what's valuable or a contribution of their talents, that really helps, okay? And I would tell you one of the things that I like to work with when you're really working on appreciation is that Strengths Insight Report. This is when I really pull out the Strengths Insight Report because it's based not only on the themes in isolation, but it's also based on that configuration of themes, and that's super important. You really get the uniqueness starts to come out. And I find, for most people, I've never had somebody actually not say this, but for most people, they read that Strengths Insight Report and it's like reading their horoscope or something, more accurate than their horoscope. They read that and they go, "Holy crow, have you been following me around?" Right? It's like it's really there. So those are the three foundation stages: understanding, awareness, appreciation. What I find with people is that they're the very first steps, but you want to take time with those steps to really unpack back of them. We think of them as like 3 easy steps, kind of like what rookies do. These are the rookie steps, but in fact, they lay the foundation for the whole thing, right? Going back to that pyramid analogy. If you don't have those in place, and in place with precision, with accuracy, with sufficient depth, what happens is the whole thing is off kilter. Oftentimes when you're coaching people who are off kilter, right? It's going back to those 3 to say, hey, look, let's go back and read the definitions for your top 5. Let's really unpack those so we make sure that we know what those are. And I think really walking people through those facets, helping them to develop awareness, helping them to really appreciate what's unique about those and what's a contribution, that's really valuable. I also find, and you see this in people who are incredibly masterful around strengths, it's a little like that concept of beginner's mind in Zen Buddhism. That notion in Zen Buddhism of how somebody's really a master is they're sort of at beginner's mind. It's like all new, all always new to them, right? I think it's the same way here. I think that there's a piece where, I've been working with strengths for the last decade. I go back all the time and look at, okay, where am I not grounded here? What am I not seeing? What am I not appreciating? Because the thing endlessly unpacks, right? It's always there for you. The place that I think is important to start is with people's top 5. So really working over your own top 5, so you understand those for yourself, because you're you're your best laboratory, right? The more you work on yourself, the more facility you're going to have with them. So really, like, working over your top 5 is so important. And then you go work with them on their top 5. That really helps. It helps in terms of doing that. So if as a coach you're helping somebody through these 3 stages, what you've done then is build an incredible foundation for helping them develop their talents into really meaningful, really world-class strengths. So that's it today. I'd love to take some questions from anybody, questions, comments, anything around this that people have. We've got about, I think we've got about 10 minutes left here, and so if anybody has questions, I'd love to address questions on this or anything you're wondering about or around this. I'm happy to.
It'll take a few seconds for us to catch up to them. So as we
great, okay.
we go into the chat room, from that standpoint. So
yeah,
Dean, as we look, as we're waiting for some questions and we look to the future.
Yeah.
Anything coming up you want to highlight as we think, we're having you on every other month, so 60 days from now you'll come up again. Any thoughts on what you'll do here in the future?
Yeah, so here's the thing that my plan is. The next time I'm on, I think I'm on every other month right now, and so the next time I'm on, what I want to do is continue to kind of build on what we worked on today. There's 3 advanced stages that I'd like to talk about next time. Those 3 advanced stages, those 3 advanced stages, they come in pairs. The first pair is self-regulation and self-expression. The second pair is strategy and application, and the third pair is alignment and authenticity. So next time I'm on, I want to work on those things, right? Okay, great. We got a question. Okay, Maureen's asking a question. Dean, when you work with people who resist spending time on this, what's your elevator speech to help them see that focusing on them is the very best investment they can make? Oh, I forgot. Let me go find it. Okay, great. Okay, so yeah, so here's the thing with this is I don't think you have to, it's a weird thing with all of us, and particularly the more mastery somebody has, the more they kind of resist going back to the foundations. It's so funny, when we started out and we were launching our first strengths coaching course. We originally, I think we called Successful Strengths Coaching. We called it something like Foundations of Strengths Coaching, and nobody wanted to sign up for it. And so we changed the name to Successful Strengths Coaching, and everybody signed up. It's like, I don't want to go back to the foundations, right? Maureen, it's not that you. I think with somebody, you don't have to necessarily say, hey, look, we're going to go back to basics here. Because I do think for some people, that becomes a problem for people, or they resist that. I think it's going back and really understanding the one thing that like when I'm working with somebody around their brand, particularly somebody who's a leader, somebody who's senior, and I'm working with somebody around their brand, I like to help them remember, gosh, those top 5 strengths, those top 5, 6, 7 strengths, you're leading with those. Those are the fingerprint. Those are the thing you put in everything. So the more you continue to unpack those, the more successful you're going to be, because those are the things you're leading with. Those are the things that give you, vis-a-vis the Johari window. They give you your blind spots. They give you those places where of greatest discovery. They give you your greatest opportunity to make a difference, to contribute, and they're the things that are going to, that the more you bring forth those things, the more you're going to have impact. So going back over and over again and really understanding, for me, it's my activator. Really understanding all the dimensions of my activator. The sense of urgency I bring, the energy I bring, how it lights up some of my other strengths, the way that I'm comfortable bringing ideas and taking them into action, my desire for action around that. So the more I've continued to unpack that, the more it helps me to be successful. It's the same thing, right? So it is one of those things about, hey, I already know this, but to your point, I will tell you, the more mastery somebody has, the more they're inclined to bring kind of beginner's mind to this. So the best you can do this. The one that I like to use, if I've got to use a sort of an elevator pitch, is going back and making sure you're exploring all the facets of the talent theme. So literally, as we wrote those descriptions, there's tens and hundreds of facets that are baked into those talent themes, and so really exploring those facets tends to be pretty exciting for people. And the more that they understand those facets, the better they are. So, Maureen, that's sort of my best answer around that. You're pretty facile with this stuff, so I'm sure that you're pretty good in working with them around that. What was the other thing? Was there another question here?
The question is a restating of Maureen's question from earlier about.
I have a team of 50 people. Some I am coaching one-on-one, and teams I might not be. I'm looking for a more effective approach. Great. Okay, great. Yeah, the thing I would say, with some people, you're not going to, when you're coaching big groups, it's tough. It's tough to be able to do this. One of the things you have to do. With those big groups, sometimes it's not walking them through. One-on-one, you can walk somebody through the work, right? In groups, you have to kind of lead them to what is the work that you should do, right? And one of the things that we found, and I'll tell you, this is an interesting discovery, but when we were building the high performance management course, we did that same exercise. That exercise that we do where we say, hey, take out your top 5 report, highlight the words and phrases that describe you best. Right? We've been doing that exercise for 1,000,000 years, right? Dinosaurs were roaming the earth. We were doing that exercise, right? So, we've been doing it for a long, long time. What we noticed is that if you put a particular lens on that, it changes the whole exercise. So like when we started doing that exercise in the high performance management course, and we said, okay, go through this report, but highlight the words and phrases that describe you as a manager. It's a totally different exercise. It's this weird thing, right? It's just totally different exercise. There's a guy that used to work at Gallup. His name's Charlie Colon. Great human being. Nice guy. Tons of mastery around his strengths. The first time he does that exercise where we say highlight the words and phrases that describe you as a manager, he's like blew his mind, because it was a totally different exercise for him, and one that he'd done many, many times before. It had a different lens. So shifting the context with that group. So even, Maureen, you're leading a group to be able to say, hey, look, use the current situation as the context for that. So it's like, okay, you're all going through a merger, okay? Take out your top 5 report, highlight the words or phrases that show that you can see would contribute to our success as we go through this merger right now. Right? So it's a different lens that you bring to that report. It's a different way of looking at it, and it drives up stuff. Context is decisive. So if you shift the context, it shifts the way that you see that content. So that's so important. So, Jim, do we have time for one more question? I think we got
one more.
Right? Okay. JB said I can see it useful in other settings. Great. I don't know. Is there another question here that we've got? You guys, is anybody got?
At the moment, we'll give them a second to have one more.
Okay.
Before we go, a reminder, and we both have a hard stop here, top of the hour. We're going to be recording Frank Newport for. Hopefully, the coaches are getting a chance to listen to our Polling Matters podcast as well. If they want to hear some of the Gallup stuff that we're doing, our Gallup numbers, we record Frank every Friday, then it releases on Monday. Polling Matters, the podcast. If you guys are interested in our Gallup numbers.
Great.
Well, I think, Dean, we've done it. Some good encouragement. One of the reasons I had you on here, as we started thinking about last year, and we went through the Gallup Learning Series, was to bring some of this goodness that I saw in the Learning Series to the general population of coaches out there, not just our certified ones, but also those who are training and are leading towards certification. So, if you're listening to this in the Call to Coach channel, we will continue to do this throughout the course of the year. Dean will be here every other month as we do. And then, of course, Dean Paul is in the opposite spot. And Paul, yep. I hope we got a chance to listen to those. Paul's very first one, he could barely sit in the chair. He was so excited about some of the things he had for the coaches.
Jim, let me do kind of a shameless plug. There's been a couple questions about, is this going to be included in the summit? This is just a shameless plug for the CliftonStrengths Summit that's coming up July 18th through 20th. If you're not registered, get registered today. There are a limited number of spots at the summit, so do get registered. We haven't determined all the breakout sessions yet. We're working on that. We are opening up some courses around the summit. So we're opening up some accelerated courses, successful strengths coaching. There's a new combo course that's 3 days that's we're combining coaching for individual performance and coaching manager and teams into one course that's 3 days long. So there's going to be a combo course. All those courses are actually going to be at a special summit price. So this is a great time if you haven't done one of those courses to do it. I think somebody saw this here. We are going to be doing a special one-day advanced strengths coaching course that is for people who've graduated from the entire curriculum. So you have to have either done the accelerated course or done all 3 of the 2-day courses to get into that one-day course. And we're going to deliver it twice, one the day before the summit starts on the 17th and one the day after the summit ends on the 21st, I think. And that's going to be cool stuff, and some of this kind of stuff will be in there. I'm just really excited. It'll be a great opportunity. Not only there'll be great speakers and great breakouts and all that kind of stuff. We're going to have some big announcements there. That's all going to be cool. Also, just great just to be with other coaches and a cool opportunity to do that as well. So that's my shameless plug about the summit.
Yeah, I like it. Excitement. I keep hearing notes from all the coaches who are anxious to get here in July and for July to come. So if you haven't signed up for that, the easiest way to do that, courses.gallup.com. And right now, as of the recording of March 18th, we still have hotel information, and some of the specifics around the schedule are yet to be delivered. I hope we'll have those next week or the week after, and we'll get those out to you. Dean, anything else as I wrap this up?
That's it. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You bet. I'll remind everyone to take full advantage of all the resources we have available at the Gallup Strengths Center, just gallupstrengthscenter.com. Make sure you send us your questions or comments. If you, we are looking for guest bloggers as well. If you think you've got some writing in you and you want to try out for our guest blogging team, send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. Put guest blogger in the subject line, and we'll get that process rolling for you. Don't forget, we've got all the resources at the coaches blog, coaching.gallup.com. Our Facebook group, YouTube page, iTunes, and RSS feeds, our iPhone and Android apps, as well as all the weekly Strengths Wisdom pieces that you guys are doing such a great job of supporting as well. It's all out there. We mentioned the courses site, courses.gallup.com in there. You might want to slow it down for this part if you're listening at 1.5 and maybe pull over with a notepad at this point. If you found this helpful, we ask that you share it, and we'll invite you back for the next Call to Coach. We've got Cheryl Pace coming. She was part of the Learning Series, and she's going to talk about her work down in Kansas City. We're excited for that. And with that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.